With Sony not releasing a new QD-OLED television this year, the Samsung S95D is the only TV 100% confirmed to be using a third-generation QD-OLED panel which is even brighter than the previous generation. On our 77-inch review sample, peak brightness measured above 1700 nits on a 10% window after calibration to D65 white point and 300 nits full fill, making it the brightest OLED TV we've measured so far, surpassing the LG G4 OLED and last year's Sony A95L QD-OLED. As we have come to expect from QD-OLED panels since launch, the PQEOTF tracking on our S95D review unit was impressively accurate in HDR filmmaker mode out of the box, with only a slight lift near black, possibly to address the low luminance color desaturation which affects every QD-OLED TV we've tested to a certain extent. That said, as you can hopefully see from our own custom-authored checkerboard test pattern, the third-generation QD-OLED panel on the Samsung S95D could render low-luminance colors in a more saturated manner than the second-gen QD-OLED panel on last year's S95C, therefore coming closer to matching a Sony BVM HX3110 reference monitor. Talking about colors, SDR color accuracy was outstanding in filmmaker mode after only some minor 2-point white balance adjustments, with an average delta error of less than 1, and no inaccuracies exceeding the humanly perceptible threshold of delta error 3, translating to accurate and cinematic colors in real-world viewing. For HDR, Samsung has implemented some overdue changes to the color space setting for the better. For starters, the color space auto setting in non-game picture presets now defaults to the BT 2020 color gamut option, and more importantly, the color saturation tracking accuracy in BT 2020 mode has been improved significantly, which means that you can now enjoy accurate HDR colors and less posterization, particularly around bright highlights at the same time, not to mention an amazing Rec 2020 coverage of 91% in UV terms, finally bringing the Samsung S95D in line with Sony QD-OLEDs without needing to jump through hoops. Coming back to the PQEOTF tracking, the Samsung S95D was still adapting its tone curve to maximum display mastering luminance or max DML metadata instead of max CLL, but helped by its higher peak brightness, the roll-off point was set higher than that on previous Samsung QD-OLEDs. So HDR titles, which have been graded conservatively in a 4000 nit container, would still be presented in a sufficiently bright manner. Furthermore, Samsung has tweaked the auto-dimming algorithm on the S95D such that prolonged dark HDR scenes would no longer dim down unnecessarily over time without needing service menu intervention, although as you can see from this side-by-side comparison, last year's S95C appeared to have received this upgrade too following a recent firmware update. HLG HDR presentation from external sources was also better, providing a closer match to the Sony HX3110 mastering monitor than what's displayed by the S95C. Bright uniformity was top-notch on our 77-inch Samsung S95D review unit, manifesting no significant banding, dirty screen effect or color tinting. Dark uniformity wasn't as pristine as that seen on the first generation of QD-OLED TVs back in 2022, but the thin vertical streaks and side vignetting were mild enough not to bother us in real-world content. Even with the picture clarity setting disabled in the picture menu, the Samsung S95D correctly performed 5:5 pull-down to present slow panic shots in 24p films accurately without telecinic judder, although once in a blue moon, there would be a brief moment of motion hiccup, especially when there's big luminance changes from one scene to the next, as you can hopefully see in this slow motion capture where last year's S95C seemed to also suffer from the same issue. To be clear, this motion hiccup was exceedingly rare on the S95D and wasn't always 100% reproducible even when repeating the same scene, so we don't think it's a deal breaker at all. Clear motion black frame insertion or BFI on the Samsung S95D remained problematic. due to excessive light loss and flicker, not to mention forced interpolation with 50 Hz content, which is the company's workaround to mask the inevitable frame rate conversion judder caused by 60 Hz BFI. In terms of video processing, the Samsung S95D did not handle low bitrate material as well as LG and Sony OLEDs for several reasons. 1. There's still no smooth gradation setting on the TV, which means in-content posterization in heavily compressed material will be fully exposed without mitigation. 2. Overscan cannot be disabled in standard definition resolution on the S95D. For example, on this SMPTE-RP133 test card in 576i, leading to a more zoomed in and slightly softer standard def presentation. And 3. Although the television correctly detected and processed 3:2 cadence in film-based interlaced material, it failed to do so for 2:2 cadence, which is far more common in the UK and other PAL regions, even with film mode enabled. Thankfully, high-definition broadcast and 1080p Blu-rays were upscaled competently to come across reasonably sharp, helped in no small part by QD-OLED's insanely high native contrast. Native 10-bit gradation was very good, with little to no posterization seen in the skies of the Martian, so the continued absence of a smooth gradation decontouring filter isn't a problem at all when watching Ultra HD Blu-rays. With game mode engaged, input lag measured around 9 milliseconds at 60 frames per second, dropping to under 5 milliseconds at 120 frames per second, which is as responsive as you can get on a consumer TV for playing fast-action games. 4 HDMI 2.1 ports are available, each carrying 40 gigabits per second of HDMI 2.1 bandwidth, together with 24 gigabits per second of DSC or display stream compression. Unlike our S95C retail unit, the Samsung S95D review sample did not exhibit any signal loss or blackouts even at 4K 144Hz in HDR VRR, possibly helped by more stable power supply on the latter's One Connect box. Samsung has also improved the Game HDR option on the Samsung S95D QD-OLED. Engaging the setting produced a hard clip rather than a roll-off on our review unit, which is crucial to facilitating source-based tone mapping for better rendition of HDRG-compliant games. However, the default HDR10 tone curve in game mode was over-brightened even with Game HDR enabled, requiring us to adjust the ST2084 and shadow detail settings to bring the EOTF tracking closer to the PQ standard. Making these adjustments would allow maximum tone map luminance and maximum full-frame tone map luminance to be set at 1600 nits on the Samsung S95D QD-OLED, injecting tremendous HDR impact to HDRG-compliant games. Interestingly, the improved color space BT2020 saturation tracking did not make its way into game mode. Therefore, just like previous Samsung QD-OLED TVs, Color Space Auto would actually track the DCI-P3 color gamut setting, causing unnecessary clamping of Rec 2020 coverage, as well as more posterization at certain tones. For playing games, we suggest switching color space to custom and color gamut to Rec 2020 to obtain wider color gamut coverage and smoother 10-bit gradation, even though the color saturation tracking in game mode with this configuration was less accurate than that outside game mode. VRR including unofficial NVIDIA G-Sync compatibility provided buttery-smooth gameplay without noticeable tearing or frame drops up to the 144Hz refresh rate we tried, but similar to all consumer TVs we've tested, some VRR flicker was inevitable in a handful of VRR games during more sedate scenes and on static menus. 444 chroma was fully reproduced in PC mode, and native 10-bit gradation was good, judging from this gray ramp pattern in the Display HDR app. Next, let's talk about the newly developed anti-glare filter implemented on the Samsung S95D QD-OLED. It is incredibly effective, diffusing direct reflections to such an extent that defined edges of reflected objects are reduced to fainter, less distracting spread over a wider area, and for a certain segment of users whose living room is very bright with little to no light control possible, the Samsung S95D will deliver a more watchable picture that's free of distracting reflections than any other OLED TV on the market, past and present. Nevertheless, there is no avoiding the fact that black level would go up however slightly on parts of the screen closest to the light source, even if it's not shining directly on the panel, hence reducing the contrast performance even in a moderately bright room. And if you follow the philosophy of the Imaging Science Foundation or ISF, who trains calibrators, contrast is the #1 contributor to picture quality. That said, those of you intending to watch the S95D in a pitch-black home cinema room will be pleased to know that the matte finish per se had no effect on contrast performance, allowing the TV to retain its rich blacks for which OLED is known. Sound quality was not a strong point of the Samsung S95D despite its 4.2.2 speaker configuration. While the highs and mid-range, including dialogue clarity, came across impressively clear, the bass response was somewhat disappointing, even after engaging the amplify function to overcome the TV's limited volume. An external soundbar or home theater system is a must to complement the S95D's remarkable picture quality. Let's sum up. The Samsung S95D represents a solid upgrade over last year's S95C, delivering higher peak nits and full screen brightness, more accurate HDR colors with correct Rec 2020 color saturation tracking, improved saturation of low luminance colors, beefier power supply on the One Connect box to eradicate HDMI blackout issues at super high frame rates, and, at last, proper implementation of hard clipping in HDRG mode for source-based tone mapping when playing HDR games, even though you will have to adjust the ST2084 and the shadow detail sliders among other settings in game mode to get the EOTF to track PQ. Being the only 2024 TV 100% confirmed to be equipped with the latest 3rd generation QD-OLED panel, the Samsung S95D also retains all the picture quality attributes we've come to like so much about QD-OLED technology, such as class-leading bright uniformity, cleaner near-black handling without chrominance overshoot or flashing artifacts, wide viewing angles without off-axis tinting, as well as rich color saturation that won't be diluted by high brightness. The matte screen coating is not exactly my cup of tea, since I'm a disciple of ISF's picture quality attribute ranking that places contrast first and everything else second. But the super effective anti-glare filter will work for some people better than a reflective TV in certain viewing environments, and in a pitch-black room, a matte screen in itself shouldn't look different from a glossier panel. The underwhelming sound quality, lack of Dolby Vision support, not to mention slightly worse video processing compared to LG and Sony may put off some potential buyers, but helped by a 3rd gen QD-OLED panel which should be the brightest among 2024 TVs, there's no doubt in our mind that the Samsung S95D is one of the best TVs you can buy this year in terms of picture quality, and so it receives our highly recommended award. Now, if you are undecided about which OLED television to buy, one place where you can get good advice is at Richer Sounds, a trusted British AV retailer with more than 50 stores in the UK, who provides 6 years warranty on the vast majority of TVs if you join the company's VIP club. You will get the best deals through cheaper VIP exclusive in-store only prices, complimentary gifts or freebies, so go visit your local Richer Sounds store or call telesales for your next TV purchase. Thanks again for your support. Okay, if you've bought the Samsung S95D or indeed any other TV, there is a sneaky setting buried in the user menu that actually worsens picture quality. To find out what the setting is and how to disable it, please watch my instruction video by clicking here.